Now, some uses of language can be a little bit deceptive. That is, it can make a little bit difficult, a little bit obscure the relationships between other sentences. But I think when we think about it clearly, it really clears the problem up immediately. That is, there are two common kinds of expressions in language that can confuse the logic, which are what we're going to call indirect use and figurative use of language. Indirect usage, when it's when something is said by way of another speech act. For example, can you pass me the salt? It's not really asking a question. The response is not going to be, yes, I can pass you the salt, but rather it's being used indirectly. It's not really an interrogative, but rather it's being used to express a command or an imperative or a request. So that's one way. We sometimes are not direct in our use of language. We're indirect. So that will make the logic a little bit confusing, and we will see indirect uses of language in arguments. And then there's figurative language, which is, it's kind of something that sometimes it has literary merit. Something, the example that we get in the book is "you're a donkey," or maybe a more common one in the vernacular is, that you are a spherical orifice in your body that's below the waist on the back side of your body. But those aren't meant to mean literally that you're that organ or literally you're a donkey, but rather you're saying something else with it. It's just a figure of speech saying, you really did something dumb or something like that. Okay, so there's these indirect and figurative uses of language that sometimes make it a little tough in looking at arguments to figure out what's going on. But I think if we're clear about it, we'll understand how to address these things. And that is, when we're doing informal logic, when we're thinking critically, when we're thinking logically, be tolerant about indirect or non-literal uses. That is, don't immediately assume that what's being said is false because the guy said, you're a donkey, and then you look, you don't have ears and a tail, so you're not a donkey. And wherever possible, try to take indirect and figurative language. And if you're looking at somebody's argument, try to change that into direct, expression that's not meant literal. That is meant literally. That is, they're usually saying when you're saying you're a donkey, it's not meant literally that you have pointy ears and a tail and you eat grass, but you should say, what the guy said is stupid. Maybe if that's what it means. And when you're reconstructing arguments, premises and conclusion have to be characterized in such a way that they're expressed only in declarative sentences. So when we reconstruct arguments, all the premises, all the conclusions have to be characterized as the declarative sentence, and they're really making these direct speech acts. That is, they're expressing, we have to assume that they've got to be used in a way to express the way the world is or the way the world is not. And finally, leave out any figurative meanings. All right, don't take things literally that were not meant literally. Recast them in the right way that makes it understandable. And that's the best way to evaluate, to be able to reconstruct an argument, to prepare us to be able to evaluate whether the argument is rationally acceptable or whether the argument is not rationally acceptable.